Hey guys, welcome around the grounds here, and in today's video we are going to be doing the NRL Round 6 tips for the 2022 NRL season. We're going to look at the team lists and we're going to predict who we think are going to win, but based on that. Sorry for no video last week guys, I had a lot of stuff happening so I couldn't actually get to that, but with that being said guys, let's jump straight into this week's NRL tips. Alright guys, moving on to the first game on Thursday, we have the Canberra Raiders versus the North Queensland Cowboys. Both these teams are coming off losses, actually both these teams are coming off double losses, with the Raiders losing to the Storm 30-16 and the Cowboys losing to the Warriors in Golden Point. Form guide wise, I think the Cowboys are in a better state than the Raiders. I think the Cowboys have probably been playing better this season. In terms of the team list, Savage replaces Frawley on the bench, and there is a little bit of doubt over Matt Tomoko, with Jared Croker waiting in the reserves if needed for the Raiders. For the Cowboys, Cohen Hess returns to prop, which puts Cotter to the bench, and Griffin Neame and Tanoa Brown are out of the squad. This one's hard to pick. If this was at Cowboys home stadium, I would pick the Cowboys because they beat the Raiders in like round 2 already this season. Yeah, in round 2 the Cowboys won 26-6, which was quite comfortable. But since this is at the Raiders home ground, I'm going to make this a bit more close. But something just tells me the Cowboys are going to pull off a win here because they deserve a win after last week's loss to the Warriors. They've been gutsy in their performances and I think that'll continue. So I'm going to predict a Raiders 14 to the Cowboys 16. Alright guys, now moving on to the first game of Friday, we have the South Sydney Rabbitohs versus the Canterbury Bulldogs. Obviously the Rabbitohs came off a win last week against the Dragons, and the Bulldogs lost to the Panthers quite convincingly. A lot of their players, especially Matt Duffy, had an off night that night. And I don't think they've put their best performance in because I heard Trent Barrett in the press conference said they only had 6 good attacking sets, which against the Panthers isn't enough. And if they want to challenge against the Rabbitohs this week, they're going to have to work on that area, work on their errors, their discipline, so they can have more sets to attack. Because we can't tell if the Bulldogs aren't improving if they're not improving in these areas such as discipline and errors. So if they fix that up, then who knows what they'll be able to do. In terms of the team list, Latrell is out for 8 weeks, so Blake Taaffe is now at fullback, with Hame Sele joining the bench. For the Bulldogs, pretty much the same as last week. Corey Allen is listed in the reserves, as he's on his way back from a hamstring injury. Again, something tells me this game that it's going to be close. The Rabbitohs haven't been consistent this year, they've been a bit hit or miss, and this just gives off those vibes because these guys have a good rivalry against each other, especially from that grand final, I think in 2014 or whatever it was. So these guys have rivalry, they have history, and I think this game's going to be closer than we might expect, but I still think the Rabbitohs have the quality and they should win this game, but I think it'll be close, so I'm going to predict the Rabbitohs 16 to the Bulldogs 12. Alright guys, now moving on to the Friday night game, we have the Penrith Panthers versus the Brisbane Broncos. The Panthers have won 8 straight in the NRL, and the Broncos have lost 3 in a row. So this game for me is quite easy to pick. I think the Panthers will probably be a bit too strong for the Broncos. In terms of teams list, no changes for the Panthers, and the only change for the Broncos is that Payne Haas is now out because he's suspended, so Corey Jensen starts as prop, with Reece Kennedy joining the bench. Panthers had a pretty good win against the Bulldogs last week. They were in second gear and they still won by 20 points, which was good, and the Broncos were unlucky not to beat the Roosters. Broncos are hit and miss. They've been competitive in a lot of games, but there's also some games where they're not competitive at all, and I feel like this game might be one of those games where they're not competitive at all. I think there's improvement in the Broncos this year, but I don't think it's enough to challenge the Panthers at all, especially being at the Panthers Stadium, where the Panthers have won like, I don't know how many it is in a row, but it's crazy. But yeah, with that being said, guys, I'm going to predict a Panthers win here, and I'm going to go for the Panthers 30 to the Broncos 14. Alright guys, now moving on to the first game of Saturday, we have the Manly Seagulls versus the Gold Coast Titans here. Manly are doing quite well at the moment. They've won 3 in a row, where the Titans are hit and miss. They've gone win-loss, win-loss, and they obviously lost last week to the Eels in a close comeback. The last 2 times these guys have met, the Seagulls have won quite comfortably, so this game might be the same, it might not. I think the biggest difference with this game is that still there's no Tommy Turbo for Manly. In terms of the team lists, Morgan Harper is out, with Tolu Kawalu replacing him, and Ruben Garrick staying at fullback. Brian Kelly returns at centre, which pushes Philip Sammy to the wing with Corey Thompson in the reserves. Kevin Proctor is surprisingly out of their 17 with Sam Lasone promoted to the bench. The Titans have been good this year. They've been very competitive in all their games they've played. Like, they play well against the good sides, but they also play bad against the bad sides, so it's really hard to read them. With this game being at Manly, it's very easy to give Manly this win, but something's telling me that the Titans, they're ready to click in one of these games. They haven't really clicked any of the games fully in terms of their attack and defense at the same time, and I don't think they're going to be flawless this game, but I think they might get a surprise win here, so I'm going to predict a Manly 18 to the Titans 26. Alright guys, the second game of Saturday, we have the Melbourne Storm versus the Cronulla Sharks. This is a rivalry that stemmed over the last 5 or so years, especially after that 2016 Grand Final, which the Sharks obviously won. In terms of the form guide, the Storm have won their last 2 quite comfortably against the Raiders and the Bulldogs. And the Sharks have won 4 in a row, which is pretty good, stemming all the way back to their win against the Eels. In terms of the team list, Alec McDonald drops to the reserves, with Tyrone Wishart named in his place for the Storm. For the Sharks, Aidan Tolman replaces Royce Hunt on the bench after being a late withdrawal. This game's hard to pick, and I think historically this game has always been close between these two teams, and I think this will be the case again for this game. It is at Melbourne's home ground, and I know how good they are at their home ground, but the Sharks have been really good lately. Their attack's been good, so this is going to be a really good test for both the Melbourne Storm's defense and the Sharks' attack. If the Storm can defend and stop the Sharks from scoring, then I feel like the Melbourne Storm will just roll over the Sharks towards the end of the game. But if the Storm aren't up to scratch, then there's going to be problems for them. But I don't think that'll be the case. I think there'll be a bit of give or take here. So I'm going to predict a Melbourne Storm 12 to the Sharks 13. Alright guys, now moving on to the Easter Sunday game at 2 PM, we have the Sydney Roosters versus the New Zealand Warriors. In terms of the form guide, the Roosters have won their last 2 and the Warriors have won their last 3. However, for both these sides, 2 of their wins that they've got in the last 3 have been against the Broncos and Cowboys as well. So these guys have versed the same teams, they've got the same results, which probably points towards this game being a bit tighter than those games. The Warriors obviously got their win last week against the Cowboys and with a field goal in Golden Point, which will have them boosted and their morale will be up. And the Roosters held off a valiant Broncos, and I'm sure Trent Robinson will make sure that their side puts out an 80-minute performance this week, which I don't think they've really done this season yet, besides maybe against the Cowboys. In terms of the team list, for the Roosters, Takiaho is back, but he's only on the bench. Sam Barrels is returning at hooker, and Connor Watson is on the bench as well. Marcelo Montoya is out with his judiciary hearing. I believe he got banned for 4 weeks for what he did last weekend, which means Tony Zalesniak returns on the wing to replace him, with Cattell returning on the bench, and Jack Murchie is now out of the squad. This game's hard to predict again. These sides are very hard to read, especially the Warriors. This game being at the Roosters' home ground, I'm tempted towards to give them the win here, and I think that's probably the only thing I'm going to say is the difference between these teams. I think the crowd and the Roosters being at the SCG be too much for the Warriors, and I think even though in a close one, I think the Roosters will get away with this one, so I'll predict the Roosters 20 to the Warriors 18. Alright guys, next up on Sunday we have the St. George Illawarra Dragons versus Newcastle Knights here. The form guide for this one, the Dragons have lost 4 in a row, and the Knights have also lost 3 in a row, so both these teams are desperate for a win. Historically, the Dragons have won the last one, but the head-to-head between these two teams have been quite even recently, so this one's going to be hard to choose between. The teams list, Josh McGuire and Tyrell Fuimaono return from long-term suspensions. McGuire is named on the bench with George Burgess, while Fuimaono is only a reserve. And for the Knights, Clemmer returns at prop with Jacob Saifidi benched and Jira Momasia is out of the side. Dominic Young is also out, which opens the door for Edric Riley to return, as he's been named at number 2. This game's at the Dragons' home ground. And we know that the Dragons usually get up for those games at home ground, and I think this game will be competitive. I think it'll be close the whole way through, but I think the Knights' quality at the end and them being able to win games recently, I'm going to slightly give this win to the Newcastle because of that, and I'm going to predict the Dragons 16 to the Knights 24. Alright guys, moving on to the last game of the round, we have the Parramatta Eels versus the West Tigers here. And this game might be bad for the Tigers. They're in a rut. I'm looking at the form guide, and I've looked at the last 8 games or so for the Tigers, and that's going back to last year, and they haven't won any of them. Obviously the Eels have won 3 in a row, and they've been pretty good recently, with a good win against the Storm the other week, and some solid performances in between there. If the Tigers show up, they could stop the smashing on this one, but if they play like they played the last few weeks against the Sharks and against the Titans, then well, I just think the Parramatta will probably put a cricket score on these guys at the moment. For the Tigers, it's literally just about little steps here. I think a good defensive performance against Parramatta, regardless of whether they win or not, would be beneficial for them. In terms of the teams list, Wonga Blake is out with a knee injury, which brings Nirakori into the fold for the first time this season. He's named at centre, with Penasini moving to the wing. Junior Paulo is also suspended. He's going to be replaced by Oregon Kafusi at prop, while Sean Lane is named in the second row. Ryan Madison dropping to the bench, and Bryce Cartwright to reserves again. For the Tigers, Dane Laurie returns from COVID protocols, which will be a good boost for them because I think he's probably one of their best players. and they really have missed him recently. Tyron Peachy, Little, Gildart and Mamalo are out of the 17 listed in the reserves, with James Roberts playing back this week. And Hastings is back on the halves with Brooks moving to 5'8", and Simpkins starts at hooker, Madden dropping to the bench. So with all these changes being said, I think the Tigers will be more competitive this game. They've got more of their players back that they had at the start of the season. I still don't think that'll be enough to beat the Eels, and unless the Tigers can show up a defensive performance, I think this game will be a thrashing, and I have no reason not to predict that. So with that being said, I'm going to predict the Parramatta Eels 40 to the Tigers 12. Alright guys, now that is the end of the video. That is the end of my round 6 tips for the NRL 2022 season. If you guys liked the video, make sure you like and subscribe. That'll help out the channel a lot. Also leave your predictions in the comments. I'll be sure to check them out, and we'll see how we go this week. So that being said guys, thanks for watching and take care.